The sky had already turned gray when Laura's car started to make that familiar coughing sound, the one she'd been ignoring for weeks. She was driving along the quiet stretch of highway just outside Burlington, Vermont, with her 24-year-old son Ryan sitting beside her. It was supposed to be a simple weekend drive, a chance to talk before he moved away for a new job. But life, as always, had its own plans. The car sputtered once, then again, and finally died completely. Leaving them stranded on an empty road surrounded by miles of forest, Laura tried to start the car again, but the engine only made a tired click. She sighed, her hands gripping the steering wheel. "Not now," she muttered. The air was cool and silent except for the wind brushing against the trees. Ryan leaned forward, peering through the windshield as the last bit of daylight disappeared behind the clouds. "Looks like she finally gave up," he said with a small grin, trying to lighten the mood. Laura forced a smile. "I told your uncle I'd get this thing checked out. I should have listened." She turned the key once more. Nothing. Ryan pulled his phone out, frowning. No signal. "Same here," Laura said, holding hers up toward the roof. "We're in a dead zone." They exchanged a look, half disbelief, half resignation. Laura had been through far worse in life. Divorce. Years of raising Ryan alone, and the kind of quiet loneliness that settled in after her husband left. But being stranded at night in the middle of nowhere with her grown son beside her felt strangely symbolic. Like time was giving her one more long conversation before he moved on to the next chapter of his life. Ryan leaned back in his seat, exhaling. "Well, looks like it's just us for a while." Laura chuckled softly. "Guess so." They decided to wait for a passing car, though the road was empty and silent. Laura pulled an old blanket from the trunk while Ryan found 2 granola bars in the glove box. "Dinner of champions," he joked, handing her one. She smiled, tearing the wrapper open. "I've had worse." For a while, they ate quietly, the soft drizzle of rain beginning to tap on the windshield. The air inside the car was cool and smelled faintly of old leather and coffee. Ryan looked out into the darkness, the faint outlines of trees swaying in the distance. "You know," he said, "I kind of missed this. Just being out here, no noise, no rush." Laura glanced at him. "Yeah, it's rare these days." He nodded. "I've been so busy trying to figure out my future that I haven't really thought about where I came from, or who I learned it all from." His tone was quiet, thoughtful. Laura's chest tightened. "You've grown up so fast," she said. "Sometimes I still see that little boy who used to sit in the back seat with a book and a juice box." He smiled softly. "And now I'm here, stranded in the middle of nowhere, eating granola bars with my mom." They both laughed, an easy, genuine sound that cut through the cold air. For a moment, the years between them melted away. They were just 2 people sharing a memory. Not a mother and son on separate life paths. The rain picked up, pattering louder against the glass. Ryan leaned back, resting his head against the seat, his eyes tracing the ceiling. "Do you ever think about happiness?" he asked suddenly. Laura turned to him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what it really is. I used to think happiness was about success. Good job, nice apartment, the right person. But lately, I don't know." Laura looked at him quietly. "I think happiness changes as we do," she said. "When I was your age, I thought I needed everything figured out. But the older I got, the more I realized happiness comes from the little things, quiet nights, laughter, people who stay." Ryan smiled faintly. "You always know what to say." She laughed softly. "I've had years of practice." The thunder rumbled in the distance, long and low. Ryan reached over to adjust the heater, but the car was too far gone to respond. He shrugged and pulled the blanket over both of them. The small gesture made Laura's heart twist. For years, she'd been the one protecting him from cold, from pain, from life itself. Now, sitting beside her, he seemed older, steadier, and in some way, he was protecting her too. "Thanks," she murmured, pulling the blanket tighter. Ryan smiled. "You did it for me enough times." The windshield fogged slightly, blurring the faint lights of the distant hills. The world outside was dark and endless, but inside it felt strangely safe. There was no rush, no pressure, No tomorrow, only this moment. Laura studied him, the strong lines of his face, the calm in his eyes. He'd grown into someone kind, someone gentle, someone who still looked at her with the same love he had as a child. Pride and sorrow intertwined inside her. He was leaving soon to another city, another life. And though she'd never say it, the thought scared her more than she wanted to admit. "Ryan," she said quietly, "promise me something." He looked at her. "Anything, no matter where you go. Don't lose this part of you, the part that slows down, that listens, that cares." He nodded, his voice soft. "I won't. I learned that from you." A small silence followed, filled only by rain. Then, as if to lighten the air, Ryan said, "Well, at least the stars would have been pretty if it weren't raining." Laura chuckled. "We can imagine them." They did, describing constellations they couldn't see, inventing names for ones that didn't exist. The laughter returned, gentle and real. The car felt warmer somehow, even without heat. Then, just as the rain began to slow, Ryan's voice softened. "Mom, there's something I wanted to tell you." Laura turned to him, sensing the weight behind his words. His face was half lit by the faint glow from the dashboard. "What is it?" she asked. He hesitated. "Not yet. Let's wait till the rain stops." And so they did. The storm outside faded into quiet drops, the world around them turning still again. But inside Laura's chest, something stirred, a mix of fear and anticipation. Whatever he was about to say, she knew it would matter. It would change something between them, though she couldn't yet tell if it would bring comfort or tears. The road was empty, the night deep. And for the first time in a long time, Laura felt that the silence between them wasn't empty at all. It was full of everything they'd never said but always felt. She didn't know it yet. But before dawn broke, her son's words would leave her heart forever changed. The rain stopped around midnight, leaving behind the soft smell of wet earth and pine. The road was silent, the kind of silence that made even small sounds like the ticking of the cooling engine feel louder. Laura and Ryan sat quietly for a moment, wrapped in the shared blanket, both lost in thought. The headlights were off now, and the world outside was pitch black except for the faint shimmer of moonlight breaking through thin clouds. Ryan finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "Mom, there's something I've been keeping from you." Laura turned toward him, her heart tightening. "Keeping from me?" He nodded, staring down at his hands. "Yeah, I didn't want to tell you until I was sure, but I think now's the time." The way he said it made her pulse quicken. "Ryan, you're scaring me." "What's going on?" He took a deep breath. "It's about the job in Chicago. I turned it down." Laura blinked, confused. "You what?" "But that job was everything you worked for. Great company, good pay, I know," he interrupted gently. "But it didn't feel right." "Not anymore." Laura stared at him, trying to understand. "Then what are you going to do?" He looked up at her, his eyes calm but filled with something deep conviction. "Maybe. I want to stay here, in Vermont. I've been thinking a lot lately about what actually makes me happy, and I realized I've been chasing things that don't mean anything to me." Her heart softened a little. "Ryan, you can't make a decision like that just because you're scared or tired. You've worked so hard." He nodded. "I know, but it's not about fear. It's about meaning. I've been running after some idea of success. But when I think about what actually feels right, it's being here, near you, near home. I want to build something that matters to me." Laura's throat tightened. For a moment, she couldn't speak. She had spent years encouraging him to go out into the world, to find his path, to never settle, but now, hearing him speak with such calm purpose, she realized he wasn't giving up. He was choosing something more honest. "You always told me that happiness comes from the little things," Ryan said softly. "You were right. I want to live that way too." Laura smiled faintly. "You sound like your father." Ryan looked at her, surprised. "You think so?" She nodded, a distant look in her eyes. Before he left, he used to talk the same way about living simply, about doing what feels true. "I just never thought I'd hear those words from you." Ryan leaned closer. "Mom, You never really talk about him. Do you still think about him? Laura hesitated. The question caught her off guard. Sometimes, she admitted. Not because I miss him, but because he was a part of who we were. I've made peace with it, though. The pain faded long ago. It just left lessons behind. Ryan listened carefully, his expression soft. You're stronger than you think, Mom. She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. I had to be. You gave me a reason to keep going. A comfortable silence followed. The night had grown colder, and Ryan got out of the car to stretch. Laura watched him in the moonlight, tall, calm, thoughtful. A man who still carried traces of the boy she'd raised. She stepped out too, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. The sky was clearing now. The stars shimmered faintly between the fading clouds, reflecting in small puddles on the road. The sound of crickets filled the air, gentle and rhythmic. Beautiful, Ryan said, looking up. Laura nodded. Almost worth breaking down for. He laughed softly. Almost. They stood there for a moment, side by side, the cool breeze brushing against their faces. It felt like time had slowed, as if the world had paused just to give them this small, quiet night. Then Ryan said something that made her chest ache. I don't say it enough, but you've done everything for me. I wouldn't be who I am without you. Laura looked at him, her eyes glistening. Ryan, he stopped her with a gentle smile. Let me finish. You spent years putting me first. You gave up your own dreams, your time, everything. And I know that wasn't easy. I used to think parents were just invincible, like they didn't feel lost or lonely. But I see it now. You've been through so much, and you still keep going. Her voice trembled. You're my reason. He nodded slowly. And you're mine. For a moment, she couldn't speak. The words hit her in a place she hadn't touched in years, that quiet part of her that still longed to be seen not as a mother, but as a person. Someone who'd struggled, endured, and still hoped. The moonlight caught her face, and Ryan noticed how tired yet peaceful she looked. You always said love is what keeps people alive, he said. You were right. I just didn't understand what kind of love you meant until now. Laura smiled faintly, brushing a tear from her cheek. It's not the kind that fades. It's the kind that changes us. They stood in silence again, watching the distant horizon where faint dawn light began to appear. Ryan turned to her suddenly. I've been thinking. Maybe I could start something small here. Open a cafe, maybe help the local community. Something that feels real. Would you help me? Her eyes widened slightly. Help you? He nodded eagerly. You've always loved baking, right? You used to make those pies for the school fundraisers. People still talk about them. We could do it together. It doesn't have to be big. Just something meaningful. Laura was speechless for a moment. The idea was simple, almost childish, but the sincerity in his voice made it beautiful. You'd really want to do that. With me, of course, Ryan said. It's time we both start living, not just existing. She smiled, shaking her head. You've grown wiser than I ever expected. Ryan laughed softly. Guess I had a good teacher. Gay sat on the hood of the car for a while, talking about possibilities, small town mornings, smell of coffee, a quiet life built from care rather than ambition. For the first time in years, Laura allowed herself to dream again. When the sound of an approaching truck finally broke the silence, it almost startled them. Headlights cut through the dark, and a kind stranger offered to tow them to the nearest town. As they climbed into the truck, Laura looked back at the broken car sitting under the moonlight. It wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was the place where everything had shifted. The night that began with a breakdown had somehow mended something deeper inside both of them. Ryan glanced at her as the truck drove off. You okay? Laura smiled, resting her head lightly against the window. More than okay. 'Cause now she realized being stranded wasn't the worst thing that could have happened. In fact, it was exactly what they needed. A moment to pause, to feel, to remember what truly mattered. And though she didn't say it aloud, she knew this night, the one that started with an ending, had quietly become the beginning of something new. The night grew colder as the rain came down harder. drumming steadily on the car roof. Emma sat quietly in the passenger seat, her arms crossed, watching the wipers move back and forth. The storm outside matched the storm inside her heart. She had been holding in emotions for so long, fear, exhaustion, and a strange sadness she couldn't quite name. The old sedan, stranded miles from the nearest town, had become a small island of silence between her and her son, Noah. He was sitting beside her, trying to fix the flashlight, his face lit by the faint glow of his phone. The car had stopped working hours ago, and they hadn't seen another vehicle since. The nearest gas station was at least 20 miles away, and with no signal, all they could do was wait. But it wasn't just the waiting that made the air heavy, was what had been left unsaid between them. For years, their relationship had grown distant. Noah had gone off to college, then to work in another city, and their calls had become less frequent. When he finally called last week, asking if he could visit, Emma had been surprised but happy. She hadn't expected their trip together to end up like this, stuck on a dark, empty road with only the sound of rain to fill the space between their words. Noah finally broke the silence. "Mom," he said softly, turning toward her, "do you ever think we just stop talking somewhere along the way?" His question hit her like a quiet truth she didn't want to face. She looked at him, his eyes full of sincerity and regret. "Maybe," she whispered. "I guess life just got in the way." Noah shook his head. "No, Mom, life doesn't get in the way. We do. We let it." His voice was calm, but there was a deep ache behind it. Emma looked away out at the rain, remembering all the times she had wanted to call him but didn't, afraid he'd be too busy, afraid of saying the wrong thing. She remembered the last time they argued before he left for college, how both of them had said things they didn't mean. That argument had been a wall between them ever since. The flashlight flickered out, plunging the car into darkness. Emma reached over and rested her hand on his arm. "I didn't mean for us to drift apart, Noah. I just thought you needed space." He gave a small, sad smile. "I did, but I still needed you, too." The words hit her deeper than she expected. It had been years since he had said something like that. For a long moment, they just sat there, the sound of rain filling the car, washing away years of silence. Noah leaned back in his seat and sighed. "You know, I used to think you were invincible," he said quietly. "You always knew what to do. Even when Dad left, you never showed how hard it was. I guess that made me think I didn't have to worry about you." Emma's chest tightened at the mention of his father. That part of their life had been a wound that never fully healed. She had stayed strong for Noah, never letting him see her cry, never letting him feel the weight of their struggles. But now, sitting beside him in the dark, she realized maybe he needed to see that she wasn't as strong as she had pretended to be. "I wasn't invincible," she said softly. "I just didn't want you to see me break." Noah turned toward her, his eyes glistening. "Maybe you should have, Mom. Maybe I needed to know you were human too." The honesty in his words broke something inside hers, something that had been locked away for years. She felt tears rising, not of pain, but of release. For the first time in a long time, she let them fall. Outside, the storm began to ease, the rain slowing to a gentle drizzle. The quietness that followed felt different, warmer, almost healing. Noah reached into his backpack and pulled out a small thermos. "I brought coffee," he said with a small grin. "Figured we'd need it for the trip." He poured some into the lid and handed it to her. She took a sip, the warmth spreading through her chest. "Still makes it too strong," she teased. He laughed softly. "Just like you taught me." The car felt less cold now. They talked freely, talked for the first time in years. About his work, about her garden, about how both of them had been pretending to be fine for too long. Emma realized that being stranded wasn't an inconvenience, it was a pause they both desperately needed. Then, as the moonlight broke through the thinning clouds, Noah said something that made her breath catch. "Mom," he said carefully, "I came home for more than a visit. I've been thinking about moving back here for a while. I know I've been away too long. I just want to be closer to you." Emma stared at him, speechless. She had dreamed of hearing those words, but never expected them. "You'd leave your job?" Your life out there?" she asked, her voice trembling. He nodded. "Yeah, it's time. You've always been here for me, even when I didn't notice it. Now I want to be here for you." Her heart swelled with a mix of disbelief and relief. The road that had once felt endless and lonely now seemed like the beginning of something new. She placed her hand over his and smiled through her tears. "You already are, Noah." They stayed like that for a while, the silence no longer heavy but full of understanding. When the rain stopped completely, they stepped out of the car. The air smelled fresh, the storm's edge fading into the distance. Noah tried the car one last time. Now, to their surprise, the engine sputtered and came back to life. Emma laughed through her tears, the sound echoing into the night. "Maybe the universe just wanted us to talk," she said. Noah smiled. "Then I'm glad we listened." As they drove down the quiet road, headlights cutting through the mist, Emma looked at her son and felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because they had finally found their way back to each other. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel lonely, and as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Emma realized that sometimes it takes being stranded to finally find where you belong. The morning light began to stretch across the sky as Emma and Noah continued their drive down the empty road. The storm had cleared, leaving behind a world washed clean and quiet. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of wet earth and new beginnings. Emma watched the horizon, the soft gold of sunrise reflecting in her eyes. It had been years since she'd seen a dawn that felt this peaceful. The hum of the car engine was steady now, almost soothing a rhythm that matched the calm beating of her heart. Noah sat beside her, one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely on the window. He looked relaxed, a faint smile playing on his lips. The heaviness from the night before had lifted, replaced by something lighter and understanding that had long been missing between them. Emma wanted to say something, to thank him for what he had said, but for once, silence felt right. It wasn't an empty silence, but a shared one, full of quiet gratitude. After a few miles, Noah turned to her and said, "There's a diner up ahead. Let's stop there. We could use some real food." Emma smiled. "And maybe a cup of coffee that doesn't taste like motor oil." He laughed, the sound easy and warm. "Deal?" They pulled into this small roadside diner just as the morning sun broke fully through the clouds. The neon sign flickered weakly and the parking lot was almost empty. Inside, the smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air. The waitress, a woman with kind eyes and tired hands, greeted them with a smile and led them to a booth by the window. Emma took a deep breath, letting the warmth of the place sink in. It felt safe, familiar, like the kind of small-town diner she used to take Noah to when he was little. She watched him order for both of them pancakes for her eggs and bacon for himself. It was such a simple thing, but it filled her with emotion. For years, she had watched him grow from a boy who needed her for everything into a man who rarely asked for help. Now, sitting across from him, she saw both the boy and the man. Her heart ached in the sweetest way when the food came. They ate quietly for a while. The clatter of dishes and the low hum of the radio filled the background. Emma watched the morning light dance across Noah's face, and she realized something that made her throat tighten. He wasn't just her son anymore, he was her friend. And maybe that was what growing up really meant, learning to love someone differently. But just as deeply, Noah looked up suddenly, his expression soft but serious. "Mom," he said, "I meant what I said last night, about moving back." Emma set down her coffee. "You don't have to make that decision because you feel sorry for me," she said gently. "You have a life, Noah, a good one." He shook his head. "It's not about that. It's about what matters to me now. For years, I chased things. I thought I needed money, success, people's approval. But none of it feels real anymore. I want something that lasts. I want family." Emma felt her eyes sting. She tried to blink away the tears, but one slipped free. "You always were the sentimental one," she said with a trembling smile. Noah grinned. "Guess I got that from you?" They both laughed softly, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel awkward. It felt right after breakfast. They stepped outside into the morning sun. The wet pavement glistened, and the air carried the sweet scent of pine. Noah looked at the car and said, this old thing isn't going to last forever. Emma chuckled. Neither am I. He smiled, shaking his head. That's exactly why I want to make the most of the time we have. They stood for a moment just watching the road stretch ahead. The sky was wide and blue now, the storm only a memory. Emma realized that life was like that. Two storms come, they shake everything apart, but they pass. What's left after them is what truly matters. On the drive home, they stopped at a small overlook that faced the valley. The view was breathtaking, rolling hills, a river winding through the green, sunlight glimmering on the surface. They got out and stood side by side, leaning against the hood of the car. Emma felt the wind tug at her hair and closed her eyes for a moment, breathing it all in. I used to bring you here when you were little, she said. You probably don't remember. Noah smiled. I do. You said it was your favorite place to think. She nodded. It still is. They stood in silence for a while. Then Noah spoke again, his voice softer now. Mom, I know I can't change the years we lost, but I can change the ones ahead. I want you to know that. Emma turned to him, her heart swelling with pride. You already have, she whispered. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. It wasn't dramatic or tearful, just quiet, full of meaning. In that moment, she realized that all the guilt she had carried, all the loneliness, was fading. She had done her best, and somehow it had been enough. Her son had grown into a good man, not perfect, but kind, thoughtful. And real. When they finally got back on the road, Emma leaned back in her seat, feeling a peace she hadn't felt in years. She watched Noah drive, his hands steady on the wheel, his eyes focused ahead. The sun was high now, the world bright and open as they neared home. She looked at him and said softly, if that car hadn't broken down, we probably would have just talked about the weather. Oh, he laughed. Guess fate knew we needed something stronger than coffee to make us talk. Emma smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. Maybe it's funny how the worst nights can lead to the best mornings. Noah nodded, glancing at her with warmth. Yeah, I think that's how life works sometimes. When they pulled into the driveway, Emma looked at the house that had once felt too big and too quiet. Now it didn't feel lonely anymore. Noah turned off the car and looked at her. He said, I might stay for a while before I move back. Help you fix the garden. Maybe repaint the porch. Emma felt her heart fill with joy. I'd like that, she said simply as they stepped out of the car. The birds were singing, and the sunlight touched everything with gold. Emma turned back for one last glance at the road behind them. It no longer seemed endless or frightening. It was just another chapter of storm that led to something beautiful. And as she walked toward the house beside her son, she realized something she hadn't understood in years. Sometimes life doesn't fall apart to hurt you. It falls apart to bring you closer to what really matters. That night, as the crickets sang outside and the quiet settled over their home, Emma whispered a silent thank you to the storm, to the road, to fate for giving her back her son, and for reminding her that even after the hardest nights, love always finds its way home.